And now for a quick departure from the cube form that I've been showing you and how color changes. I want to use this circle and turn it into a sphere and let it represent, let's say, an orange. And I want to introduce you to the idea of color spots. Different color spots occur on a form within the light and within the shadow. Or you can think of them as different color shapes. But I think it's more useful to think of them in terms of color spots. Starting with this circle, since it's going to be an orange, I'm going to use an orange color. So the first thing you need to do is to think of what the local color of the object or form is that you're going to paint. So in this case, since it's an orange, I paint the whole thing an orange color. And I'm going to be using my rough sketch here of this figure, and I'll be applying to that figure what I'm applying to this orange. So I'll color him orange like this, just as I've colored the circle orange. So that's my local color on this figure. And even his hat is an orange color. But you can see it's darker and much less intense than the orange color I placed on the circle. Think of color in the beginning stages as just indicating it in the fewest, biggest, and simplest color spots or shapes. So this is just one big orange color spot or shape. Then you break down that spot or shape into other color spots or shapes. Also, you need to think about the color of the light source. So let's say the light source is yellow, and I'll place that over here to represent the yellow light source shining on this orange. But now what I'm going to do is add a red color on the shadow side. This whole side is going to be in shadow. But right now, I'm focusing on smaller spots of color that I'm adding to this large spot of orange color. Now you may ask yourself, why did I add a red color here? Well, if you think back to the cube and what I showed you about reflected light, you'll realize that the reason why I added red here is because of this red wall that is reflecting its light into the shadow side of this orange. So therefore, I have this red spot. But then, down here, I'm going to add another color. First, I'll add a darker version of the orange color, something like this. And then I'm going to add some green to it. So I end up with a color that looks like this. And that's because this green is being reflected into the lower part of this orange. So when orange and green mix, they neutralize each other a little bit. Not to the extent as when complementary colors are mixed together, such as orange and blue. So now I have 3 color spots. 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, I intensified this color somewhat. It was a little too dark and dull. And now it's a little closer to what I have on this orange here. But what I'm also going to do to my rough sketch is add some green down here like this. And then also a red wall over here, let's say, that he is in front of. So I want this sketch to be somewhat similar to this setup here. And this is just to show you all of the various sources that can change the color of the form that you're painting, and that form consists of many different colors because of all these different sources: the sky, the ground, buildings, trees, whatever these other sources are, that reflect their color into the form and thereby establish a lot of different color spots or color shapes. In addition, there's the light source that also creates different color spots. So a form doesn't just consist of one or two spots of color. There are many different color spots on a form. And knowing this will enable you to paint your forms so that they look much more convincing and realistic. They will have more conviction. And I think I'll also add a blue sky to represent the blue wall behind the orange. So now I have all these different colors in my color sketch here. And they will be reflected into the color of the figure, just as these various colors here are being reflected into the orange. So what I'm going to do now is establish a cast shadow, and the cast shadow is a darker version of the green on the floor. But now, when it reaches the wall over here, there's going to be a change in the hue, because that is a red wall. I can't add a green shadow here. There's going to be a darker version of that red, so it's like this. See, it changes hue. The cast shadow changes hue according to the hue on which that cast shadow is being cast. Now I'll do the same for my sketch over here. I'll add this darker shadow, darker cast shadow right there like this. Maybe even darker in some spots. Now, as you can see, this is a very rough sketch, but it's enough to get this information across to you so that you understand what happens. Now let's say that part of this red wall here is more saturated in color than what it is now. So let's say this part right there is a bit more saturated. Quite a bit more. What happens now over here is that there's going to be another color spot, and it's going to be a brighter red than the red that is there now. So I'll add a brighter color spot right there like this. So now I have an additional color spot. Now it can't be as bright as the surface that is reflecting the color. Let's say that this part of the ground plane has a brighter green, like this. Now, that brighter green is going to be reflected into this part of the shadow. So therefore, this color is going to change somewhat. I'm going to add a little bit of that brighter green. And so now I have another color. So there's an additional color spot. As the form moves more toward the light, the colors are going to get warmer. So there are going to be additional color spots. And the next one would be something like this, for example, occurring right around here. It's a little too light in value. Not quite right yet. So you see it's gotten warmer and lighter in value, an additional color spot. Now back to my color sketch here, and since I have more color spots on the orange, I need to add some more color spots on my figure. So I'm going to add the darker part of the figure, which is in shadow, and it has that darker red color that you see on the orange. But now let's say there's a lighter, brighter red over here on this building. So part of his shadow is going to have a different color spot, a brighter, more red looking color spot, just like here on this orange. So this brighter red is being reflected into the shadow on this side of the figure. Now down here, some of this green is being reflected into the lower part of his cape, just as on the orange here, this green is being reflected into this part of the orange, the shadow side. So that green is mixing with the red, and when you mix green and red together, they neutralize each other. So a more neutralized color is the result. But I can exaggerate that color a little bit by making it lean a bit more toward the green so that it doesn't look so dull and gray here. And now this part here, the terminator as it's called, or I like to call it the turning edge, that is going to be a warmer color because just as on the orange here, shadow is moving toward the light, and therefore it's beginning to warm up. The color is beginning to warm up. So you can add a warmer color here. That'll change later on as I continue working on this. I'm doing this, as you can see, very rough and very quick. So what I'm doing on this orange here, I'm doing on my rough color sketch so that you can see how what I'm showing you here is applied to an actual painting. Now with all these different color spots that are occurring here on this orange, you can begin to see that there's the beginning of the feeling of a three-dimensional form, but it's not quite there yet. Now right here is where I'm going to leave the color it's most saturated. Then this part is going to be somewhat different in hue, a little bit different, because it is receiving more of the yellow of the light source. So it's changing a little more toward the yellow-orange, you see, something like this. And I'll do the same for my rough sketch here. I'll add some of that color over here like this. I'll fix it up later. Right now I just want to get these colors down. And the same on his helmet. Okay, now I have an additional color spot. The next color would be one that has even more of the yellow color of the light source, because this part of the form is closer to the light source, which is called the highlight area, and therefore I'm going to add more yellow and make the value lighter as well. So this part is actually becoming somewhat desaturated because of the white that is being added. And now I have an additional color spot. This color spot can represent the more saturated part of a highlight. Then I can add an even lighter and even less saturated color to that part of the highlight that is receiving most of the light, and that hot spot there really represents the sun here. So I have an additional color spot now. I raised the highlight, as you can see. It was a little too far down here. Since the light source is right there, the highlight would be around here, would be further up. Now this is not 100% accurate. I'm just trying to get across to you this idea of all these different color spots or shapes that occur on a form. Now there's an additional one that needs to be added to the shadow side, and that color spot is referred to as the core shadow. And I'll add a darker value, a darker version of the red that is there now with a little bit of blue in it, which makes it a bit of a red-violet. When you add blue to red, you get violet. So there's the core shadow, an additional color spot. See all these color spots. Now the color spot changes down here for the core shadow, since the red is being reflected into the color of that core shadow. So there's another color spot. And I'll add that core shadow to my rough sketch. I'm just roughing it in for now. I'll get back to it later on. So the core shadow appears cooler than these other colors within the shadow. Sometimes the core shadow will have a warmer color to it, or a warmer hue than the other colors within the shadow. Color adjustments need to be made. The Terminator is a little too light in value, so I need to darken it and move it a little toward the red, because it's moving into the shadow. There's a hue change that takes place. Still not quite right. A little darker, a little more red maybe. And a little more red. Takes a while to get the colors right. More like that, you see? Now there's also reflected light coming from the blue wall. So I'll add some blue over here to this part of the shadow. Some of that blue being reflected into the upper part of this orange. Now let's say there's a lighter, warmer green over on this side, so that means I add a little more yellow. And there's a warm patch of green right there. So that part is also going to be reflected into this part of the orange, but not that much because it's not in shadow. But nevertheless, if you have a strong color like this next to a form that is in the light, a little bit of that color is going to be reflected into the lower part of the form, adding an additional color spot like that. So you see all of these different colors on this form. Now the way the shadow is positioned here isn't that accurate, so I'm going to make a change. It's more like this, you see? It curves around like this. And now you get a feeling, or a greater feeling, of a three-dimensional form. And if I blended these colors together, then that feeling of a three-dimensional form would be even greater. Maybe I'll do that, see if I can do it quickly with the smudge tool like this, just blending it all together, all these different colored spots. And you see how the feeling of a solid three-dimensional form has been increased? So mainly it's value that gives you the feeling of a three-dimensional form, but in addition to value, color can also help to increase that feeling of a three-dimensional form. And the reason for that is because of the color changes that take place on a form, as you can see here with this example. So I'm smoothing out the color spots a bit more. And it's right here that you see the local color of the orange color, most intense part of this orange, most intense color seen right here, because the light isn't really affecting this part, and neither is the shadow. So therefore, at this halftone or mid value, that's where you see the most saturated color. I'll blend the shadow side a little bit more like this. The terminator or turning edge isn't quite right yet. It needs a little bit more red in it. Many times you can see more saturated, a more saturated reddish color where the terminator is. That's probably the most difficult part of a form to get just right, where that terminator or turning edge is. If you make that part more saturated, the color in general, the overall color, will appear more brilliant looking. See, as I'm adding more saturated color, the color actually begins to look more brilliant. Now this is something that the great Andrew Loomis used to do. If you look at his paintings, you'll see that where the shadow turns to light, many times he places the most saturated color right there, where the turning edge is, or the terminator. I did a little more blending, and now there's also additional color spots within the cast shadow. So I'm going to add a bit more green, a more saturated, lighter green right there. That's a color spot. Then right here, where the ambient occlusion, as it's called, occurs, that is the darkest part of the shadow, right there. That's where all the darks gather. They gather down below a form. So not enough light is getting down here. Therefore, it's very dark. The edge of the shadow gets softer as the cast shadow moves further away from the form casting it. The hardest edges are found right there at the beginning. But you make this a little bit softer so that a greater feeling of distance or depth is achieved. Softer edges are found in more distant forms. Sharper, harder edges are found on forms that are close up. Now getting back to my rough color sketch here, I'm going to add some additional color spots. I'm just roughing it in, as you can see. So let's say I pick up this part here, add that over here like this. The lighter part right there. That part of the form that is closer to the light source is getting warmer, lighter color. So now let's say there are some brighter spots right here of this green. More of the light is hitting this part of the grass, just like you see here. And that brighter green is being reflected into the lower part of his cape like that, so you see more of the green. I don't want to spend too much time on this rough sketch here. So far what I've covered, I think you get the idea that there are all these different colors that are occurring on a form. So I added a highlight on his helmet here, and then the turning edge right there, or terminator. I'll darken that a little bit, blend it in with the core shadow that's there. And maybe make that edge somewhat brighter, which makes the color appear more brilliant. The surrounding color appears more brilliant. Now, even though this is very rough, this color sketch that I did, it looks very appealing, pleasing to the eye, because of all of these various colors that are being reflected into the figure, just as all those different colors are being reflected into this orange here. And I need to add some blue. Just as I added blue right there into the shadow, this figure needs some of that blue also in the shadow. So I'm adding it right there. Some reflected light from the blue of the sky within the shadow and on his hat or helmet. Make sure that you don't make the color that is being reflected into the shadow too bright. You see this red right there? That's way too bright. So it has to be toned down. Reflected light is not going to appear that bright in the shadow. Then a nice white accent will draw the eye to the head, but not a pure white. There's still some color in the white, something like that. Adding it right there helps to draw the eye up to the head, and it adds a nice accent. I think that's about as far as I'm going to take this rough sketch. I'm not going to finish the sketch. It's really not necessary. I think you get the idea of what I've been showing you here. Now let's say instead of a light source that has a warm yellow color to it, the light source is white. So I'm going to change this yellow light source to a white. Now what happens to the color on a form when the light source is white? Well, white is a cool light. A white light also will desaturate color to a certain extent. Depending on the strength or intensity of the light shining on the colored surface of the form, will determine how much of that color is going to be desaturated. White will dilute a color, in other words. For example, if I have a red over here, and I add some white paint to that red, like this, the color has been diluted. it no longer is as saturated as before the white was added. So white will desaturate or dilute the intensity or saturation of a color. Therefore, when white light shines on a form, that color of the form, its local color, will be diluted or desaturated. So let's say I cover all of this part of the orange with the orange color, its local color, and this white light is shining on that local color. So because it's no longer a yellow, which when mixed with an orange color will turn that orange a bit toward the yellow orange, white, not having any color within it, like yellow or orange or red, which would mix with the orange color here of this orange, what happens is that there is no change in hue. So therefore, what the white light does is it lightens the orange color like this, but doesn't change its hue. And it desaturates that color. The stronger or more intense the light is that shines on the form, the more that local color of the form is going to become desaturated or diluted in its strength. Now what happens to a halftone area, which is this part of the form? And you see it on my rough sketch here, which is this part here. In the halftone, that's where you find the purest color, or the most intense color. See, when you compare this color to this, you can see how much more saturated this part of the form is because it is receiving less light, less of that white light. Now, when the light source is really strong and white glare can result, which then does something like this, where you see even less of that local color. So there's even more desaturation that takes place in glare. So how would this look on a painting? What I'm going to do is, instead of having this color here, which leans toward the yellow-orange, because in this painting there's the yellow light source, I'll just remove that yellow-orange color and just add more white. So there's no hue change. There's just a change in value and in intensity. The color is being desaturated by the white light. Since I now changed the color of the light source to a white instead of a yellow. So it's what I did over here. Then when the light is very strong, just as I indicated over here, when there's glare, even more of the hue is reduced in its intensity. So something like this. This would represent glare, just as you see glare here. So always take into account what the color of the light source is, which will then determine what the colors in the forms that you paint are going to be.